My name is Jesan Sorrells, and welcome to Earbud U. Figured we'd start off by, like I said before, introducing myself, talking a little bit about what this podcast will be about. You're going to notice an interesting little bit of difference in sound quality as I start to figure out how everything works here in the studio. You will know that there are a lot of ums. I do a lot of ums. I don't script a lot. I don't write a lot of stuff down. I do try to speak from the heart, not from the head. I do try to speak without deliberation. However, when I'm interviewing, after you get past this initial intro and we go right into the interview, which I'll talk a little bit about that today, you will notice that I try to avoid ums as much as possible and let the guests speak for themselves. So this is episode 1 of Earbud U, a division of Human Services Consulting and Training based out of Endicott, New York. Human Services Consulting and Training is a full-service conflict engagement consulting firm. I started it back in December of 2012, at a time when I had just been, not let go, but I just quit my job at Ithaca College and decided that entrepreneurial pursuits were for me, and this is something that I wanted to do. This is not your average conflict engagement podcast. I'm not going to sit here and talk to a whole lot of people from the conflict resolution world and try to really convince you that this method of conflict resolution here or that method of conflict resolution there is really a good method or really a good way for you to go. Instead, I'm going to try something a little bit different. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm really going to focus on, with each and every podcast, bringing on a guest that can really talk about conflicts that they have in their lives, conflicts that they have in their industry. And sometimes we get to those, sometimes we don't, but really talk about, who they are and talk about why they made the decisions that they make. I love process. I'm a process-oriented guy. So the process of putting together this podcast was really very difficult, and the journey to putting this podcast together has been very difficult, has been trying at times. There have been a lot of starts and stops, but I'm sort of getting it together. My background is very simple. I have a master's degree in conflict resolution and reconciliation from Abilene Christian University in Abilene, Texas. Yes, it is an online master's. No, that does not mean that it is any less valuable than, a sitting in-person master's somewhere. It's actually really, in some cases, even more valuable. The cohort that I went to Abilene Christian with, and the cohort that that influenced a lot of this program and a lot of my perspective on conflict resolution, really helped me sort of develop as a person. And I still stay in contact with a lot of those people. So don't let anybody tell you that an online degree isn't valuable. I have a background in higher education. I was a residence director for many years at the University of Minnesota, and then, as I said, up the road at Ithaca College. And by the way, up the road, for those of you in upstate New York, means 45 minutes, that way. So if you're listening to this around the country or around the world, that won't mean anything to you. Go Google Map it. Anyway, so I started my firm, like I said, in December 2012, and I decided that I was going to really sort of jump into this whole content creation business, because I can't think of any other way for a consultant to make it in this world other than in developing content for everybody, and also for a niche market, but also for everybody, And we'll suss out more of that and more of my motivations as this podcast continues. Our guest for this first episode is a gentleman named Darren McDonald. Now, Darren McDonald is a very interesting guy. He actually walked up to me, and I don't know if he remembers the story the same way that I do, but he actually walked up to me and introduced himself to me at a local networking event that I was at, and I did a presentation there, and he found me to be dynamic and interesting and engaging, and we became friends. And we've been friends for about the last 2 years. Friendship with Darren has been very interesting. We play racquetball together. We've had coffee together. We've shared bits and pieces of the entrepreneurial journey. Darren started out in a family business in the bottled gas industry and has really sort of developed himself into a really genius e-commerce guy and a really genius web guy. And I like hanging out with guys who are smart, and women too, who are smart, who are interesting, who are exciting. I enjoy engaging with them about interesting and exciting things, and I want to continue to do that. So, yeah, that was why I had him, on my first episode. He's really high energy. You're going to hear that sort of come through in the nature of kind of how he talks and the nature of how he approaches his entrepreneurial journey, and he'll talk a little bit about that. There are a couple of stumbles, as there are in anything out of the gate, anything that's in its infancy, which this podcast is definitely in its infancy. You'll notice as you listen to a lot of the episodes, and we'll have a different intro for each one of the episodes, where I'll sort of talk for a little bit, maybe about 5 or 6 minutes. This one's going to be a little extra long because it's the introductory one, but I'll talk for about 4, 5, 6 minutes, and then we'll go right into the content of the show. But you'll notice a difference in sound quality between this intro and then the rest of the podcast. Now, the reason for that is very simple. I don't have a whole lot of people that come into the studio. My studio is a converted garage. My wife, my current wife, and my only wife, converted her garage into a photography studio. And so I sit in this studio, and that's sort of why you hear the echo in the background. I sit in this studio, and I record the intros to my podcasts. But the majority of the time when I'm interviewing somebody, it's typically over Skype. I do strongly recommend using this if that's something that you're getting into. Podcasting is something that you want to get into. And if you want to have guests on, but you can't invite them in, Skype is a really good tool to use to sort of interview people. And the sound quality is really excellent. As I've been editing things, I've been noticing that myself. Well, to move on. One of the names for this episode, or the name of this episode, is hashtag Building for the Future. Now, that's my hashtag on Twitter. That's the hashtag if you follow us on EarbudU on Twitter. And hashtag Building for the Future is sort of the motto that I built Human Services Consulting and Training around, our parent company. I believe in the future. The future is coming whether we like to think about it or not. You can't veto it. You can't put it out to pasture. You can't destroy it. Well, you can try to destroy it. But either way, the sun is going to rise tomorrow and the sun is going to set tomorrow. That's the only guarantee that we have until we don't have that guarantee. But for right now, that's the only guarantee that we have. And so I think we should honor that. And we should try to, develop and work that philosophy into our lives. We should be building for the future. What is the one thing that you're doing every single day that is building for the future? When you get into a conflict, you're actually taking a brick out of that wall that you're building, or that building that you're building, or that edifice that you're building. And that could be in your family, that could be in the school, that could be in your church, or it could be in all three of those places. So what are the conversations that I'm having that are building for the future? What is the content that I'm developing that's helping you build for the future, my listeners, my readers on my blog? What are the kind of interactions that I'm having with my family that are helping me build for the future? That's where that hashtag comes from, and that's what that hashtag really means. So you got a little insight into who I am, and as I said, there's 12 more of these episodes this year, and then there's going to be multiple episodes moving forward. But this is our first episode, so I don't want to overwhelm you with too much right off the bat. So let's lead into Darren McDonald. He's going to have a rousing intro, and I hope you enjoy the show. And thank you for listening.
Hey there, and welcome to EarbudU. Get your knowledge on through your earbuds. I am your host, Jesan Sorrells of Human Services Consulting and Training, based out of Endicott, New York. Now, we have a few announcements to make for our initial inaugural podcast before we move forward. First off, to follow us, you want to check out our Twitter feed at earbud_u. We are also live on Instagram and putting out candid shots of today's interview. Check it out at earbudU, all one word, and follow along using hashtag #BePartOfTheShow. Great. Now on with it. Our special guest for our first show today is Darren McDonald, entrepreneur, investor, former IT executive, and owner of several shares of Quora.com. You do own Quora.com, right? I mean, you own the whole entire thing.
Not as of yet.
Not as of yet? Okay, he's working on it. He's a good personal friend of ours, and we hope that through this interview, you'll learn something about conflict engagement. You'll also learn something about poker, Star Wars, and who would win in a fight between Yoda and Darth Sidious. Now, he's a huge supporter of both EarbudU and our parent company, Human Services Consulting and Training, has been since the beginning. He's also from Maine, which apparently is, what's the motto of Maine? What's that Maine motto?
Well, I like to think of it as vacation land.
Vacation land. Okay, that's not the one that I got off the internet. So we're going to start off by asking him a few questions. And typically, I would ask, kind of what are you promoting? But, we're not that kind of podcast. So who are you and what do you do?
Well, Jesan, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mm-hmm.
I am a business consultant. With my experience, I've done a lot of work in e-commerce, having built a business from the ground up. And that was actually for a packaged chemical gas company, where I eventually served as a vice president. And I have a lot of experience in finance, marketing, sales, purchasing, inventory control, pretty much all the different hats that we had in the business. I got to wear them all at one time or another.
Hats or hacks? I thought I heard a life hack there.
Sometimes you have to hack your way through when you're wearing new hats, but 21 years I was in that business.
Wow.
And
that is a long time.
It was fantastic. And we sold that business in 2008. I stayed on with the acquirer. They got acquired in 2009. I stayed on with the new acquirer. And in 2010, we parted ways. And since then, I've been consulting for a corporate governance firm called GMI Ratings. And they provide investor services and all sorts of research on companies. And I do all kinds of things for them. So,
right. Well, that sounds like something that not only my listeners would want to know, who are traditional mediators, but also conflict engagement folks. But it also sounds like stuff that just in general people want to know, because people come from all kinds of different backgrounds and do all sorts of different stuff. So. Now, the GMI ratings, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Do they know you're doing this podcast?
They don't.
They don't. Okay. Well, we won't tell them. It's, no one's listening. It doesn't matter. So that answers the question about what do you do exactly. So now, with all of the businesses and all the different ways you've been sort of diversified across, I guess it'd be your 15-year career? Probably 16-year career, something like that. Probably a little bit longer. You give me that look like I don't know how many years.
Well, 21 years was with the chemical gas company, and it's been 3 years since then. So
okay.
Yeah, we're getting up to 25 years.
So we're getting up to 25 years. So I'm a decade behind, basically, is what you're
saying. You're catching up fast.
Okay, all right, awesome. So, well, with all that experience and all those levels of differentiation. What are some conflicts? So let's get that out of the way right away. What are some conflicts that typically arise? Because I know, you mentioned, gas, and you mentioned that it was a family business. Tell us about what it's like working with family.
Sure. Working with family is both a pleasure at times and an extreme challenge. When you have when you don't have the ability to leave it at home,
right?
It surfaces everywhere in your life,
right.
And
you better get that merger, or I'm going to cut you over the turkey.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the lines blur. So when
right.
you're at work and your boss is your father,
mm-hmm.
You take liberties that no one else would be allowed to have,
right.
and you take enough of them,
mm-hmm.
and resentment can form, and
right.
arguments can inflare that don't even really relate to what's the underlying issues. And so it just takes really making sure that you flush those things out as often as possible, that you when everything's calm, you get together and say, listen, this is what bothered me, this is what we need to work on, and if you can get to that level in a family business, you are heads and tails above all the issues that you might run into. And it took us a long time to get there. I grew up in the business like my father did, and so we had to work that out as we went. And there were certainly arguments that got extremely heated, and people walking out of meetings. And you have other coworkers.
The Jerry Maguire walkout with the goldfish in the bag.
Well, close to.
Close to it. Okay.
Close to.
The goldfish is going with me.
Fortunately, it would be a walkout so that it didn't get to that level. But nevertheless, finding the respect to keep it professional, and
right.
we got there, and that was what made it so enjoyable. Is getting to that level of respect where we understood, hey, listen, we don't go beyond this point. This is how we work on things, And that really enabled us to be a team. And I had a lot of uncles and cousins in the business, so there was a lot of that needed to happen between all of us.
Well, and how difficult is it when you have, and I see this with some of the local businesses that I consult with, but also just having conversations with other small business owners, typically most of whom are family businesses. How difficult is it to kind of transform yourself into an adult in the midst of, all these people knowing that, you hit your brother upside the head with a stick when you were like 5.
It's hard.
It's hard. That's got to be difficult.
But to do that, for me, it was about earning people's respect. It's about putting in the hours. It's about having the work ethic. It's about having the high moral values that you want to have and bringing them to the workplace. And when you've brought anything but that to the workplace, that's just more work you're going to have to do to undo that. When people see you get up and walk out of a meeting because things have become so heated, versus they see you throwing something across the table, well, that's a start. That's a start of taking some better action. And I never threw anything across the table, but
I gotta watch out. I gotta watch out for your arms here. So you gotta watch out for the arms and hands. Keep them all inside the car at all times.
Absolutely.
Well, one of my favorite shows, and I'm gonna switch gears slightly. I'm gonna talk a little bit about process. I want to talk about that, not necessarily conflict resolution processes, but just life hacks that you have. I did bring that up earlier. One of my favorite shows is on Crackle.com right now, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I love the Jerry Seinfeld show because I am so enamored with the idea of getting up in front of people and performing. And 9/10 of those people in that room may absolutely hate you, and they think you suck, and they don't want to laugh. But you get up and you do it anyway. You do it night after night until you have a hit show, and you're coming on for Johnny Carson, and oh my gosh, there's your life. So, walk me through the process of Darren McDonald's day. Like, what does Darren McDonald's day look like now that you're no longer in the family business?
Sure. So I've got a home office, and first thing in the morning, I'm usually getting an exercise routine done, which is great for getting my energy going. And
is that the tennis?
No, it can be tennis, but
because I drive past the tennis courts and I see you in the morning, going back and forth.
Yeah, in the summertime you would. In the summertime, but no, I've got a home gym. So I work out at home, and then by 7:30 I'm usually in the office, and working for GMI, I'm using a tool called FileMaker. It's a database management tool, and I'm connecting through a VPN to their network, and I'm accessing all their data. And right now I'm on a project where I'm pulling in about 100,000 data points that we're pulling in for UK and Australian companies that have had their annual general meeting, and they've had to vote on usually a slate of about 20-25 proposals. That generates about 5 votes per proposal, and at 25 there's about 500 companies for UK, 500 companies for Australia, so it's about 1,000 companies. So again, about 100,000 data points. I'm importing all that data into their system. I'm making sure that it goes in smoothly. I'm doing a lot of manual editing of the data to make sure it's just the way they want it. And that's all getting pulled into their system so that they can use it for pushing out to their clients. And they do ratings analysis on these companies. They have algorithms that score information that's going in. And so I'm pretty much all day doing that.
How do you work with distributed teams? Because as a consultant, you're coming in as an independent person saying, or even showing them, hey, these are the data points, these are the things that I see. You do with this what you will. Yeah, we communicate well with each other. I have. And he just dropped his phone. This is why you have podcasts. They go live. Oh, that's your wife calling. She doesn't like it that you dropped the phone. That's terrible. You can't drop the phone. We're live, doggone it.
We work really well together in distributed teams because I work with several team leaders, and they are always keeping me abreast of anything that's coming down the pipe that's going to affect my work, and I'm always cluing them in to anything that's going on. So we have a live chat program that we can use. I'm emailing them on a regular basis. I've got a person out in California who's project managing, and I'm sending him updates on a weekly basis. And so we've got a pretty smooth setup to keep all of each other informed. But fortunately, my job is a bit of a silo. I can pretty much work independently, and what I'm doing usually doesn't affect anybody else. And I usually get an email if it's going to. They kind of know, hey, he's out there, this is what he's doing, and we better let him know that there's going to be some issues or something.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, as a conflict resolution consultant, as a conflict engagement specialist, dealing with people in conflict, I'm not necessarily siloed. I mean, I can be, when I'm sitting in my house, I got my workflow set up. So, I'm on the email. I think you said one time, I've got the email attached to my finger like that. And I do, I got the email attached to my finger. Yeah. I've got the Facebook Messenger going. I've got all those kinds of different screens going. Sometimes moving through 8 different screen modes in one screen all at the same time. Using a lot of Google Cal and all that. You said, is there a certain specific program that you really, really like that you found is really like, yes, this is, I'm going to use the term here, this is balls out the best like project management tool I've ever used?
Oh, goodness. No, I don't think so. I'm using a lot of tools. I have used a lot of tools, and it really depends what we're talking about, but I haven't found anything that's lasted through all the different kinds of projects I do. So there's always a different tool for a different project. Right. Whether it's e-commerce, does it need to be a packaged solution for an enterprise? Yeah. Which, I'd be thinking IBM has WebSphere, which is a fantastic commerce suite that you can spend $100,000 on or more. Mm-hmm. Or a much lighter version of it too. Or are we talking open source? I've used OS Commerce, which has a whole content management system built in, or Hootsuite for my own personal management of social media.
Oh my gosh, I love Hootsuite.
Hootsuite's great, but there's lots of tools out there, and they all have a niche. And I haven't found something that is a daily. Oh, I have to have this. I have to be using this. It depends what I'm doing. If I'm working on my own social media stuff, it's Hootsuite. If I'm working on some other tool for some other business, it might be something that's really geared towards them that works for them.
Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about, where does your inspiration come from? And let's talk a little bit about, the inspiration that you have for doing, you've got some movie scripts, you got this whole creative side to you as well. You write movie scripts, you're just arguing, or making an important point with my producers, about Star Wars 7, I believe it is now. I'm losing track of the numbers, but Star Wars 7, and that's another level that you and I have connected on is love of film. I mean, I'm a huge film guy. I believe in the ability to tell stories, and really to do that well. Sometimes, I land really well with the story, and I'm able to tell that. Other times, it just goes off, into the sunset somewhere, and it just doesn't work. So talk to me about, kind of where the inspiration comes from for doing what you do, because that seems like a total, 180 kind of over here thing from I get up in the morning, I do my tennis, and then I go sit in an office, and I'm, categorizing 150,000 points. So how do you make that switch? Where does the inspiration come from to make that switch?
It's passion. It's about passion. It's about interest. When I first started working with GMI, it was because I really wanted to understand how to research and investigate companies. Okay. And that informs me as an investor. I'm currently participating in the investing process in stocks, and I wanted to know more about how to dig in to corporate filings and understand them better. I thought, what better way than to start working with a company that specifically does that, pulls all this information together, scores it. How can I start understanding their business better? That tells me how to start understanding other businesses better.
Well, we did also say that we're not going to talk about your tax returns.
Oh, no. Let's not talk about that at all.
Let's not talk about that.
But passion, for me, it does express itself in so many unique ways, and I've always just wanted to follow that. So musically, I played saxophone in pre-high school. Okay. I played guitar in high school. I like to sing. I was in a band for a number of years called the Tidal Waves. Okay. They are a retired band at this point, but I was with them for maybe 5, 6, 7 years, and love music. And musically, I'm extremely eclectic, so I love all kinds of different music. Love film. Grew up, my father bringing me to the movie theater at age 2. I think at that time I'm not sure which film it was, but that would have been Star Wars, I believe. So I think my first film was Star Wars. And
Closing the loop.
Closing the loop. And so many films. I mean, we were at the movie theaters. If we weren't skiing, because we did that growing up on weekends, we were at the movie theater. And so, and among other places on mountain bikes and whatnot. But so it's all about passion for me. In writing, I discovered that very early on. I don't know how, really. I mean, I remember before high school just writing things. My mom kept these things, so I've got them now. I'm very fortunate my mother is a collector of her child's things. Being only child, I'm sure this is the reason.
Yeah, this is the reason. See, I have 3 siblings, and so I'm lucky that I did anything got left. You know, my oldest sister was like, "This is crap." Throw it outside, step on it. My younger sister didn't care. No, that's terrible. It wasn't like that. But I mean, I was a visual artist, so I saved a lot of my drawings, and I did comics for a lot of years, and really attacked storytelling through a visual medium. But it sounds like you did it, with the writing.
Yeah. I also like to doodle. I'm a doodler, so my drawing is a little abstract. Although I used to like to draw comic books. I used to take comic book covers.
I did not know this.
And at the very beginning, I would trace them. So I take trace paper and I trace them. And then
that's a legitimate way of doing it.
And then I graduated to I'm going to freehand it. And I started freehanding them, and some of them were very good. But then I just went from there more to doodling, and I love making sort of strange arrangements of things.
You're like the Alan Moore of like IT guys.
Yes.
You're like sitting in one corner somewhere in a room, pounding out this story. Okay. Have you ever published any comic stories?
I have not. So I have a number of I think I have thousands at this point of poems. I have hundreds, if not thousands, of short stories.
Okay.
And I only have maybe a dozen screenplays that are in the works. They are a lot of the poems are all complete. But even though some of them are not, and the short stories, I would say none of them are complete.
When are you going to get to publishing? When are you going to finally?
I was thinking when I retire and I'm 60,
you retire. Okay.
I'm going to start going through this stuff, and I'm going to start working on it all. But I think that's kind
of
ridiculous.
You're never going to retire.
No,
you're never going to retire.
I think it's kind of ridiculous. There is no retire. It's just do it in flow, and we'll see what happens.
Guys like you and I that are in our 30s now, we're never going to retire. It's not going to happen. Like that's why I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship, because I don't think the promises that were made to us with pensions and Social Security and Medicare, those kinds of promises don't exist for people in their 30s or younger even. And so we got to strike out and at least put something out there into the world. So you're not going to. I'm here to tell you, I'm from the future. You're not going to retire.
No, you're right. You're
not going to retire. You're going to be like talking about, you got these thousands of poems. You're going to be like Carlos Castaneda, up in here.
I've been talking to a friend of mine who's got a novel he's trying to publish, and he's been working with different publishing houses and talking with them. I've been talking to him about compendiuming, making
Is that even a word?
Well, it is now. Making a compendium out of all my poems and just submitting it and seeing what happens. So I don't know. It's that versus start sending individual items off to Barron's or somewhere.
Well, I've got my book going right now. Hopefully, by the time this podcast gets launched, actually not hopefully, by the time this podcast gets launched, it'll be out there. We're all 35 hits, and so have you ever thought about? I mean, because I'm going into it from a totally different angle, where because I'm an entrepreneur, I want to be in charge. I want to break a model that's been set up, because that's kind of how my brain works. Self-publish, exactly. And there's no stigma to self-publishing anymore. You got BookBaby out there, and you got a number of other places. You got Amazon. Publishing writers' content. And so with this explosion of content creation possibilities and distribution channels, self-publishing is no longer a dirty word the way it was when we were kids.
That's right.
So have you ever thought about going in that direction?
I have. Okay. I didn't know nearly as much about it as you do, so maybe I'll be coming to you for advice.
Maybe. Maybe that's one more thing we'll be connecting on. Well, what do you do for fun? Like you said, you were in a band, and so what do you do for fun? What do you do to kind of, shake the cobwebs off after you've been sitting for 3 days, with 150,000 data points and you haven't seen the sun? Like, what do you do to shake off the cobwebs now?
Well, I think
it was a defunct band, so you're not playing in a band anymore.
Well, yeah, no, I'm actually, right now I'm learning piano.
Okay.
So that's my
How is
next
that?
instrument that I'm tackling.
I always wanted to do that.
I
And
love
not the sort of
piano.
like, nuns across the knuckles sort of way. I didn't want to do it like that.
No, in fact, the teacher I was working with initially, she was almost in that camp. She was
Okay.
very disciplined,
Yeah.
and she came from a very disciplined background, and my wife and I had to make the decision. Okay, this is not quite working out. We want gentler, kinder. And we're working with a woman now. She's fantastic. She makes me laugh the whole session through, which is exactly what I need. And I have a great time doing it. I'm learning it. She says I'm learning it in leaps and bounds. I feel very good about it. I'm picking it up well, and I'm enjoying it. And so, yeah, no, it's great.
So what I'm picking up is you're a bit of a conflict avoider. Is what I'm picking up. is that would that be an accurate? Would that be a fair and accurate description?
I think it's fair. I grew up in a household that did not shy away from conflict.
Okay.
Fighting was something that you were kind of expected to do. If you wanted something, you were expected to have a loud voice and to be aggressive about it. And I think that in my older age, I'm starting to want to find ways to connect with people in a more. I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
I'm understanding what's motivating you. Well, now let me see if I can't, in your terms, give you what's motivating me, and let's see if we can't work together and make something happen here.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm trying to resolve conflict
Right.
is through mediation, through
Yeah.
figuring out what's your motivation, and now can I convince you that my motivation doesn't directly oppose yours? There's a way to make both of this work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I really do believe in the connection economy that Seth Godin talks about, and Mitch Joel and all these other guys that are, for what I consider to be the kind of the really high-end, high-stakes guys in not just marketing, but also just in business in general. I think that what they talk about, the collaboration and the connection piece really works for guys, and actually men and women who are really committed to building that collaborative framework. And so I think the churches that you see that are really, really successful are the ones that have built, regardless of what your belief system is, the churches that you see are the ones that have really built that connectivity tissue and have connected both on social but also connected individually with people in the pulpit and in the pew, or from the pulpit in the pew. And then you also see that with organizations like 37 Signals is a favorite of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I love those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Taking that one little slice area and saying, hey, this piece of project management that Microsoft doesn't control, we're right here in this niche. Like we're here, and we're going to connect with everybody here. It's the Seth Godin long tail.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I struggle with, because people who are aggressive or overly assertive are always going to be with us. It's a biological, genetic, evolutionary function.
Yep.
And so there's no way for us to get past that.
Right.
And I wrote a blog post actually about this last year, which was called, Who Will Hire the Bullies? Like, who's going to hire people who are assertive and aggressive? Because they're not going to go anywhere, and they're going to have families, they're going to have jobs, they're going to need to eat, they're going to need to pay the electricity. Like, who's going to connect and collaborate with those people, past just trying to get them to fit into a mold?
Yeah.
And how is that going to work? But for collaborative guys, or it sounds like you had the background where you were in that assertive, aggressive environment, and then you managed to make that switch. How did you, with all that being said, how did you do that?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not even sure I can answer that. I just realized, I think through a lot of trial and error, I realized that being overly aggressive can damage relationships. It can really sour things, and I just realized that's not what I want to be doing. So how am I gonna start doing something different? And I started testing. Okay, if this is slamming people over the head, then there must be another way. Let me ask this person instead of just telling them this is what's going to happen. Let me ask, and I realized, hey, you know what? People like it when you ask, instead of tell, and actually start engaging more. And I was always a people person, so I think I just started switching over to my people person side versus my authoritarian or aggressive side.
Okay.
And I still can manage to sort of work between the two. When I know that something needs to be done, I can lay out, hey, I need you to hear, this is the clear message that needs to be passed on. We have to get this deadline in,
Right.
or the repercussions are A, B, and C. So now tell me about what's preventing us from getting there, and let me help you. What can I do to make your job easier if that's what the problem is? So you can do both. You can come in and say, I got a big stick and we got a big problem, but listen, let's go find some solutions, and what can we do to win? And
well, when you have a big stick, every problem looks like it's something to be hit over the head with. That's the trouble with having a big stick. That is the trouble with having a big stick. Well, do you find that when you're sitting in your office by yourself, you have time to be more introspective about that and kind of go over, oh yeah, I did hit my brother in the face with the stick when he was like 5, and I do regret that.
You have to be disciplined. I remember early on, I did not like working by myself. In fact, I still prefer to be out interacting with people. I'd rather be part of a team.
Right.
But I found I had to be very disciplined because, you can do all kinds of monkey time. I can start getting on the internet and start playing with things, and I have to be very disciplined and not allow myself those luxuries. I don't want to be spending time being introspective when I'm supposed to be at work.
Right. Yeah.
So I really try hard not to be. I really try to be focused on the work, and I set myself goals. If I know that I should be able to pull in 10 proposals or 10 companies or whatever the number is, then that's the goal for the day. If I don't make it, I look at, well, what happened? What prevented me? Oh, well, there was this one company that was really tricky. Okay, that's allowed. Oh, you got a call from somebody. You took a call from mom, and now you wasted an hour.
Oh, the whole hour's gone.
Well, now you're going to have to spend it somewhere else. This evening, you better get back on the system and log another hour in and get the work done. So,
what are some writers or maybe authors that have helped you kind of maybe navigate that process? Because as I keep saying, no man is an island. You don't get to. You don't figure this out by yourself. And so, for me, I know I'm very much influenced by Zig Ziglar. Very much influenced by Zig Ziglar. I don't have a problem with Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is fine. I read some of Tony Robbins stuff. Les Brown. Even what? I'll even go out on Wayne Dwyer. I've read Wayne Dwyer stuff. I'm currently listening to a couple of different books of his right now. But I'm also reading a book here that I got an advanced copy of, which I can't really get into on the air right now. But yeah, that's right. I just brush my shoulders off a little bit. But what are some authors or what are some inspirational folks where you like that's a go-to book? What are some of those for you even in your workspace?
Yeah, there was and I struggle to remember the author's name, which is ridiculous because he was the CEO of the company at the time, and he's a fabulous CEO. I think he actually had come from GE and moved over to IBM. I want to say Kirshner is his last name. It's just terrible that I can't remember, but he wrote a book. I believe it was called
Someone on the internet will.
Oh, they'll get it. Yeah. Making Elephants Dance or Elephants Can Dance or something like that. And it was about the idea that IBM was such a big corporation at the time with so many management levels that for him to turn the company around, because they were having some troubles, really required him to dig in to all those levels himself personally and get personally invested and get to understand what are the challenges at every management level, and then he could start making management changes, and then he could start influencing with decisions. And I thought that was a fantastic book. I absolutely loved it. It really struck me that he wasn't somebody who sat up in the ivory tower and said, well, I could just see that we just need to make these sweeping changes from here, and whatever happens. We'll just lay off people, we'll just do some random stuff, and I know
some random corporate nonsense.
Yeah, some random corporate that I know will make numbers work, but won't necessarily make business work, won't actually be customer focused, whether your customer is external or internal. He looked at it that all of his customers were the managers, and he needed to figure out a way to get them to be motivated to do for customers what he wanted to do for them, and that was fantastic. But I was going to start leaning in the other direction of literary authors. But it was really going to be a bit of nonsense that I like Douglas Adams, and I like Kurt Vonnegut, and these folks really inspire me to think outside the box, because they do.
God bless you, Mr. Rosewater, got you to where you are today.
Cradle, all sorts of fun stuff. It's great, but it does. It allows me to think creatively with any problem.
Yeah, I just realized the other day I was looking at my bookshelf. I have it's been years since I've read a fiction book. Like I switched immediately from reading, books around higher education, which is my background, books about student development theory, books about cognitive development, psychological development, behavioral development in teens and young adults. So I switched from reading all the heavy kind of research-based stuff to going into conflict resolution, and then reading, Kenneth Cloak and a number of other folks who are just standouts in the field, and reading and consuming everything. Crucial Conversations, Kenneth Cloak, Crossroads of Conflict. What are some other ones? Oh, Dealing with Difficult People. And so going in and reading all those types of books, and then when I started my consulting business, switching right into, now I'm reading business books. I'm reading, Gary Vaynerchuk, and I'm reading Jab, Jab, Right Hook. I'm reading, Control Alt Delete. I'm reading, Building Our Tribes. I'm reading, all these kind of marketing, business, entrepreneurial. Jeffrey Gitomer, The Little Red Book of Selling. I'm reading all these books. But fiction, like the last fiction book I read was, oh gosh, it was probably, and I'm ashamed to say this, it was probably like 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time since I've actually sat down and read a fiction book. Like when I want to get fiction, I go and watch a movie on Netflix. That's what I do. That's how I get my creative juices flowing.
I feel like for the last few years, I haven't been reading as much books as I have been taking online courses, doing things like that. So Steve Blank, for an example, he's an entrepreneurship professor at Stanford, and I took a course from him. So when I want to know something, I'm kind of digging in online and finding all kinds of resources there. And I'm no longer picking up books as much, but I had that whole period where I was reading all kinds of books. I was reading self-help books. I was reading business books. I was reading all kinds of stuff like that. But it has been probably 10 years since I've been doing all that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, talk to me a little bit about, and I'm going to ask you this because as a conflict engagement specialist, the core of my business is really it's built around Christian principles, but I believe that you can take those and apply those everywhere, and everybody can benefit from them without necessarily bringing the God of the Bible to those people. And there's a lot of audiences that I talk in front of or that I present in front of. That's not the appropriate place to bring that up, but you can bring the principle there and really activate on that principle because it's universal, right? Okay. Talk to me a little bit about Hinduism. Are you practicing Hindu, or is that just like your belief system that you've like adopted, or how is that?
No, neither.
Okay.
So that my wife is Indian by descent. She was born here in New York, but her parents were born in India, and they are Jain. Okay. Jainism and Hinduism are very, very similar to each other. Okay. Some believe that one came of the other, but regardless of how you slice it, there's a lot of beautiful principles there about how to treat people and how to live your life. Okay. I certainly can talk a little bit about it, but I'm not a follower of the religion. I don't practice it. I was raised Protestant, so I went to church and learned a lot about the Bible, read from passages all the time. But I probably stopped going to at least the congregational church that I grew up in by the time I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I attend church, but we attend a Universalist church. Mm-hmm. And I've, for the past 20 years, been picking up things from all religions. Mm-hmm. So I like some principles out of Taoism. Mm-hmm. I like principles out of, I do like principles out of Hinduism, but I also like principles out of, I had another one that's really been influential in my life, and it's going to run away now.
Buddhism.
It was Buddhism. It was Buddhism.
Look at that.
Thank you. You were holding it.
I was holding it.
So, okay.
How does that animate how you approach the conflicts then? Like, how does that, is that what tells you, hey, you just switch from assertive and authoritative to collaborative here in this situation, or is that something that doesn't even get into the conversation because you're going off of kind of a brew of everything that's inside of you?
I would say
your past experiences and everything.
Yeah, it's not like I have one particular ethos of thought that says, okay, this is how I'm going to inform. I'm more coming maybe from a moral stance that I want to bring a lot of integrity to this person. I want to be really open with this person. I want them to understand me, and I want to understand them. Okay. So I want to investigate what it is that's motivating them, understand what their passions are, what their problems are, and then I want to bring solutions, and I want to share with them, hey, here's where I'm lacking, either in knowledge or in skill, but here's what I can do. And when I think you reveal to people who you are, your faults as well as your strengths, and you show them how committed you are to them, it enables you. It enables the relationship. And I don't think that particularly comes out of any religion, although I think you can find all kinds of stuff from all religions that inform on that. Everything from doing unto others,
which is an animating principle that human services consulting and training has, and it's an animating principle that I approach working with people in conflict around, because so much of what I see in conflict is do as thou will. I'm going to do to you what I can do to you, as the Greeks used to say. The powerful do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. Yeah. That's a paraphrase. I believe that's from. Well, I'll be correct. It's probably Aristotle. I don't know. I got a lot of Greeks jumbling around in my head, but I mean, it's an animating principle of power, right? Like one of my favorite shows on TV, on Netflix right now, is the Borgias, and it is just astonishing to kind of see how power, even in a fictional drama where everything is kind of over the top, and it's some of the most over the top writing ever. And I was tweeting at Larry Cohen, one of the staff writers, on there about kind of how I admire the language and the over the top writing. It's just kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, when you're sitting there and you're looking at it, I think these animating principles of power over then filter down to everybody else in society and in culture. So you have some poor illiterate guy, who's beaten his wife, because that's what he sees reflected back to him from the society. And then you've got her, putting her kids out, or, abusing her kids, or not being able to give as much love as she should be able to give. And so I wonder how many of what kind of animating principles do you find really work towards that collaborative piece, sort of getting to that collaborative piece. And you said, you're not looking in one particular thing, it's just part of that brew.
It is, but I know that there are lots of little things in that brew that are helping me. I think of Tai Chi, for example. I took martial arts, several different styles, and I think about Tai Chi, and I think about how using energy that's coming at you, sidestepping it, but then bringing it past you, working with energy that's already there. Okay. So if you know that a punch is coming, if you can step and then grab the wrist and pull it, you're now magnifying your strength of pulling that person, and you're going to have the leverage, and you're going to have, and I don't know that I specifically ever thought in a conversation, I'm going to Tai Chi this person right now. They're telling me that they want to go do this, and I'm going to make them think that that's what they're doing, but they're really going to get what I want done. Right. It's not that happening for me, but I think that
then you'd be a Borgia. You go full Borgia. You can't go full Borgia. You can't go full Borgia. You can't do that. You get in trouble when you do that, Darren.
But I know that there are principles that work for me like that are happening for me. And it's a result of looking at all these things. If you think of the Tao, they think of that being the way. Yep. And a perfect example is if you're a butcher, there is a perfect way to slice that cut of meat that the knife will slide through with almost no effort at all. And that's the way that the knife should go through. Right. And you need to find that way as a butcher. That's your task, is to find the way. In life, it's a metaphor for life, that you should find your way through life, but it's the way. When you're in the way, wow, that sounds like you're in the way, but when you're
get out of the way.
When you're practicing the way, everything is falling into place, everything is with ease, you're not struggling to perform because you are performing at peak, you are performing with no obstacle. And so those principles guide me, but don't necessarily inform moment to moment.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about something else that I find fascinating about you. Oh yeah, I did the research. So, and this is something you told me that fascinates you, and it fascinates me because I'm a big fan. I'm very interested in game theory. Now, everybody who's going to listen is now going to, basically send me every single link on the internet about game theory, and I don't stop that. I don't need it. But you really just stop. No, it's already happening, and I can hear the clicking happen. Stop. But tell me a little bit about playing poker.
Sure.
And how do you, because that's another side. That's a really competitive piece right there.
Absolutely.
You know, I guess you got to get that assertiveness somewhere once you're like redirecting the energy.
Absolutely.
And so you're redirecting it to the poker table.
I have a whole bunch of things I like to do for competition: tennis, chess. I like to play pool. I like to play poker. And sure, I mean, I don't want to get into the math because there are books out there. You can go read Doyle Brunson's Super System and all kinds of great books. I've got
don't send us links.
I have a whole shelf full of books on poker that I've read or skimmed, and so there's lots and lots of great math that you can use to understand what's the percentage at this moment. I've got 4 players at the table. I know what my cards are. I know what cards I've seen, if any. And I can do some quick math and say, you know, my percentage to win is 48%. But now we can kind of forget all that and say, what has this person to my left been doing all night? Well, I see that they've been calling all the bets no matter what. Okay, so that's what kind of person they are. You know, maybe you can't get much more information on that. But the next person, I know that they've been bluffing. I've seen them get caught several times. So you can start to put together a profile. And I'm a profiler of people. So I start to build a profile and I start to understand this is what the people at the table are like. And then I just have a gut read based on all that information. It's just a gut read. It's not always right, but it's right enough of the time that it makes it very satisfying to play poker for me. You know, I win a lot and I enjoy it a lot. So I really get a kick out of it. I've managed to win tournaments to get on TV. I've played on TV.
Okay. What is that like when you play on TV? I mean, I know the cameras are there, and you know, there's the makeup, and then there's the producers, and there's a Crafts Food Services truck over there by the blackjack table.
Oh goodness, it's not nearly as glamorous as all that, but that sounds wonderful.
There's some
I need to
lady
get to
bringing
that
you a
level.
turkey sandwich. Meanwhile, you're watching this guy. He drew on the last flop, and this guy he's sweating, and you don't know what's going on.
You know, I thought I'd be really nervous, but I had a chance in the green room, if you will. It wasn't so green, but I had a chance in the green room.
Deferred interim.
Yeah, to talk to the other players and just strike up general conversation. And just through that, I immediately began to get a sense of what people were like, and I thought, I can relax. People are very exposed here, and no one is putting on a really strict face. So I got my strict face on, and I really didn't let anything out, and I really played well. I mean, I made it to the final table, which was a few episodes, and I didn't win, but I had a great time, and I beat a lot of people, and I felt really good about it. So. The cameras, you don't even notice them. If you're not nervous and you're just paying attention to what you should be paying attention to, which is the cards and the people and yourself, you have to self-examine. What am I doing right now? What image am I putting out to everybody? And you want to switch that periodically. So I might start by calling everything. And I want people to think, oh, he calls everything, that's who he is. And then later on, I'm going to be doing something completely different to try to get people to think the one thing, but play off of that and do something different.
So are you more like Matt Damon or Ed Norton in Rounders?
Oh my goodness.
Your approach.
Oh my goodness. I guess.
Or John Turturro. I love John Turturro in that movie.
John Turturro.
You know, the grinder. He just comes in and he grinds.
Now,
He
you know that
doesn't
they're
care.
making another film.
I heard this. I don't.
Let's hope.
With
Is De Niro in it? I don't
the era of Hollywood being moribund with ideas.
Oh,
stop.
it's ridiculous.
It's terrible. Like,
it's ridiculous.
It's horrible. And then Shia LaBeouf is stealing stuff. And I probably mispronounced that. Is stealing stuff from people and getting caught out on the internet. I saw that the other day.
I don't know who I'm most like in poker. I really don't. I know.
Well, you got those 3 archetypes. You got John Turturro, who's the grinder. I make my rent, and then you got Matt Damon, who loses on a huge hand, and then is like driving a truck at 5:00 in the morning because his life sucks. And Molly, I can't remember the actress's last name, but she's like this lawyer, and she's like, I don't want you going out to the poker table ever again. Exactly. And then you got Ed Norton, who's like taking all these risks, going and playing poker games with union guys and almost getting his fingers broke.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I've been nervous. I've been leaving poker games at 2 or 3 in the morning with a giant pocket full of cash and thinking, I'm going to get clubbed around the corner. That's what's going to happen.
That's what's going to happen.
All the guys who left here as they were losing, they're all standing around the corner somewhere.
And no matter Tai Chi is going to help you out with that.
No. So, but I've never been in that situation, and I don't, I guess I'd like to be the Matt Damon character, but I don't know that because I don't,
Or maybe you're more like George Clooney and Michael Clayton. You just show up. You play a few hands and then you leave.
I think that's a lot more where I'm at right now.
And then your car blows up randomly while you're looking at a deer.
And I'm, yeah, thankfully.
Field. Yeah, because you're a fixer. You come to fix things.
That's it. I love that.
I love that movie.
It's great.
I watched that movie. I mean, it was during a really terrible period last year when I went home for a week with my mother because my grandmother was in the process of passing away, and my mother never watched it before, and she just she wanted to get a break, and she's a lawyer, so she's got the legal background, and then I've got the mediation background, the conflict resolution background, so we're sitting there and we're comparing notes and we're putting our stuff together.
That's great.
All that kind of stuff. And she's telling me what I don't know, and I'm telling her what she doesn't know.
Oh, that's great.
And, we're going back and forth. But the poker piece in there, because he was coming out of the warehouse and the industrial sort of setting,
yeah,
with that ridiculous coat on, ridiculous camel hair coat. But he's always gambling in movies. Like, what is it with these guys?
I know who I'm like. Daniel Craig in Casino Royale.
Okay.
That's who I'm absolutely like.
Okay, all right. My producer just gave the thumbs up.
That's who I'm like.
Okay.
I'm either crushing or I'm getting crushed.
Okay.
And when I'm getting crushed, I'm going to use that to my advantage.
Right.
And I'm going to learn. I'm going to crush.
Are you a person who looks at the arc of kind of a failure to success and then success to failure, or are you one of those people that just kind of wallows? And I ask this just from an entrepreneurial perspective, because as an entrepreneur, I find that on a lot of projects, I'll launch them, and then if they don't work, I'll start to wallow a little bit. And I try to keep another project. I always keep a project in the holster.
Yeah.
That way I can go back to that project and start working on that. That way I don't wallow. But you said, you're either crushing it or you're getting crushed. Does poker help you with the entrepreneurial piece? Overcome that?
Yeah, it probably does. But I do similarly to what you do. If I have a project that stalls for me,
yeah,
I move on, and I do know that I'll come back.
Okay.
But only once I have understood my failure, only once I have understood what my plan will be going forward. And until then, I'll let it sit and percolate. It's percolating. So if I've been working on a personal website, for example, that's been very stale. Or if I've been working on 5 blogs and they're very stale. And you're laughing because you know that this is the case with me.
I've seen these 5 blogs.
And they're very stale.
And they're very stale.
I'm not going to come back to them until I'm ready. Until I'm really going to get committed. Until I'm really going to have a plan.
That'll happen when you retire.
Well, that would be perfect.
That would be
something to do. I'm going to need something to do.
Something to do. What the heck? No one's going to be listening anyway. No one's going to be reading. What the heck? Why not?
Exactly.
Well, we talked about poker. We talked about screenwriting. We talked about your creative side. We touched a little bit on your love of computers and your ability to build. I've gone to you for some advice around building, which I took your advice and I did not go down the dark hole of Satan, and I just defragged. And anyway, my computer is working fine now. So I took your advice. Doing an entire rebuild is not. It's beyond my capacity. There's just certain things that are beyond my capacity. As an entrepreneur, there's things I just take off my plate, and that was one thing I took off my plate.
Very smart. Very
It's
smart.
like, no, I'm going to outsource this to somebody else. I'm not going to hire myself. But we talked about computers. We talked about that. Goofing off on the internet. What do you do to goof off on the internet other than look at pictures of welcome to Maine, posters?
So geektyrant.com is one of my favorite sites for media.
Okay.
I'm constantly getting, information about video games and new movies and rumors and all that stuff from that website. But there's a whole slate of websites that I like to use for.
Are you on Ain't It Cool News?
I've been on Ain't It Cool. It's been a
What do you
long
think of
time.
Harry Knowles? I mean, what do you think of that guy?
He's smart.
Really?
He's smart,
Really?
because he's got a huge following, so obviously he knows what he's doing.
It's the talkbackers. The talkbackers make that site.
Whether or not he's...
And they're ridiculous.
Well, he's obviously got them enticed, so... I haven't been to that site in years, but I used to go. I used to be
I go back there occasionally.
Yeah.
Like Quint is still on there, and a couple of other guys. I think he's still on there. But a couple of other guys, but the talkbackers just make it for me. Oh my god! Because these are people with like a compendium of pop culture knowledge in their brains before the internet came around, and they're cracking back and they're making illusions and they're connecting things together, and you cannot get out of there without just like losing your mind.
It's fun.
And eventually you have to stop. You have to stop looking at geeks. You have to go away. You have to do something else. Because if you keep looking at them too long, it's like the sun. You stare at it too long, you'll blind.
I love all kinds of websites. I'm a fan of science, so I follow some science blogs.
Okay.
I like, oh goodness, there's just so many different things that I like to look at on the internet.
Well, okay. I mean, when you come up with a few, we'll come back and ask you again about them.
I'll be prepared.
You'll be prepared. You'll be more prepared for the goofing off on the internet question. Okay, it's okay. We're gonna move on. So, Quora.
We talked about that.
Quora. We talked about Quora.
It's a great site for answering questions that people are floating out there, or you can float out your own questions. I find that the community there tends to be really smart people because they downvote you if you don't give a smart answer.
Yeah.
So those people are drummed out and intimidated and shunned by the community. But I see a lot of CEOs in there. Ashton Kutcher is an active participant on there because he's been in the startup community in Silicon Valley for the past 7 years or so.
Really taking that Steve Jobs role to heart.
I had no idea that he was actually that active. That was before the role. That was 5 years before the role. He was already doing that stuff. He was actively putting his money in with startups. He was meeting people. He was getting into the scene. And then when that movie role came around, he was dying for it and got it.
Well, I haven't seen it yet. But I read the Walter Isaacson book, and I'm fascinated by Steve. I'm not fascinated by Apple products, but I am fascinated by Steve Jobs just as a person and as a personality. And so, I wonder kind of how much of him, filters through, that entire startup land. And clearly, after Ashton Kutcher's coming in, a lot of it is. I bet he's got an iPod in his back pocket somewhere, or some other Apple product. So, well, I mean, it's good to know that Ashton is putting his money where his mouth is, and he's more than just a pretty face. That's
right.
Good to know.
Right.
Nice to know there's life after that '70s show.
I haven't seen any life since the '70s show, so we'll have to see on that still.
My last question is, I want to ask you a couple of questions to close. Is there anything you'd like to promote today? Anything that you're doing that you got coming up that you want to promote, you want to talk about? Books, podcasts, moribund websites. I'm a blogs you haven't touched in years.
I'm a startup entrepreneur. I'm actually working on a startup right now, but I would love to work with anybody who has something going or needs to get something going and just needs some fresh perspective. Okay. So I'm totally open for networking. I would ask people to get at me on LinkedIn. Find DarrenMacDonald.com. It's MacDonald, and happy to connect. Happy to start working on things with people, even just from an idea perspective. But I've certainly got some projects in the pipeline, and I'm looking for talented people. I'm looking for system engineers. I'm looking for sales executives. I'm looking for and actually, with some contacts that I'm making right now, I could probably get other people connected who aren't even related to anything I'm doing. So I'm always looking to put people in touch with other people and get things going and watch magic happen. So I would just encourage anybody who's thinking about anything that they want to partner on to give me a shout.
Well, and the reason I asked you onto this podcast for our inaugural podcast is because I know you're a high energy guy. I know you got a lot of things going on. I know you got a lot of connections, both deep and broad, and so I wanted to bring you on and make sure that people could really get a hold of you and really figure out how to connect with you.
I appreciate that.
So my last question is, and this is really a kind of a challenging one, but I do like to end with a challenging question, kind of just to get people to think. And I think we've done a lot of thinking here this last 60 some odd minutes or however long it is that we've been talking, and it feels like when we talk on the phone. That's what it feels like. We're just going back and forth. But when we think about, this is a challenge question. When we think about the future, and I mean we as in the societal we, the overall we, and I want to know from your perspective, when we think about the future, what do we think about?
When we think about the future, what do we think about?
Yeah.
We think about our place in it. Mm-hmm. We think about our legacy. We think about those around us who we care about. We think about things that we can affect change in. We think about the things that we can affect change in. Hopefully we're thinking about what we love. Hopefully we're thinking about who we love, what we love to do, and how that's going to change and what we can do about it.
Excellent. Great answer. Well, once again, thank you, Darren McDonald, for coming on to the inaugural podcast for Earbud U. Please download us on the website, earbudu.com. Please follow us on Twitter at earbud_u. Please follow us on Instagram using hashtag be part of the show. And we want to thank you for listening.